Welcome back, everybody. Today's video is going to be the top 3 of everything in 7.35, as we're going to be talking about all the new things in the new patch and a lot of what I've been seeing so far at ESL Kuala Lumpur, and also what we're seeing in terms of win rates in pubs of like the most drastically changed heroes and all that kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and get started. And without further ado, we're going to start with the biggest 3 gameplay changes, in my opinion, that you guys should keep an eye out for. So first and foremost, they made it so you can no longer cheese Tormentors with pretty much anything. There were a lot of heroes that were broken because of the fact that they could just solo Tormentors at 20 minutes. So examples of this is they added basically a damage over time radiance type of spell, which is meant to address heroes that were armlet toggling like Huskar to solo the Tormentor. They made it so you can't heal couriers anymore. So they made it so Dazzle can't do it. And then they also made it so that the Tormentor can no longer go below 0 armor. So heroes like Slardar, as well as Razor, and others that were cheesing it that way can't do it themselves. So Tormentor is officially an objective that takes at least 2, usually 3 heroes to bring it down. So be very cautious about your Tormentor taking, as we see teams like Baboom feeding heroes to the Tormentor at the start of the patch. So it's really important to be wary that they made those things much scarier to bring down. Secondly, Twin Gates are costing 75 mana. Treat it just like a teleport scroll. It's really important to note that this mana is taken from you when you start the channeling. So you can't just like channel, debate whether or not you're going to go through, cancel, channel again like in the past. It's going to punish you. So Twin Gates are much more punishing mechanic, and you have to commit much harder if you are going to go through them. And you can't just go through them, place a ward, go back through. That's 150 mana. That's a lot of mana that most heroes don't have at that stage of the game. So what that means is we're seeing a lot more lane sitting supports like babysitters like Ogre and Abaddon. Heroes win rates that went up, and also you're going to have to lean away from heroes potentially like Skywrath Mage who use a lot of mana in order to gank. So be very wary that 75 mana and the 75 mana to go back is going to add up. The third most drastic change in terms of game mechanics comes in the neutral creeps giving 2 less gold. Now that seems like a small deal, but what that means is it tilts the balance of heroes that like to jungle and flash farm that way, and heroes that like to lane. Specifically, like Alchemist gets buffed by this because he loses out on less percentage of gold because of the Grievel's Greed. But a lot of heroes that like to sit on lane now, we're seeing carries getting picked like Faceless Void, Lifestealer, as 2 very notable ones, are going to go up in value. Also, cores like Timbersaw that are kind of unkillable, that just sit on lanes, are also going to go up in value. So noting that doesn't mean jungle camps are completely useless, but heroes that like to sit on lanes and aren't afraid to do so are definitely better now. Moving on to the biggest 3 item changes in this patch. Number 1, without a doubt, absolutely broken. It's gonna get fixed probably in the next week or 2 if you ask me, is Shiva's. Shiva's is now built from Veil. It gives you 20 armor instead of 15, so it has a nicer buildup. It gives more armor. It gives all stats. Most heroes would prefer that over intelligence. And now the Shiva's active is the exact same spell with 15% debuff of the spell damage taken by the opponent. So this item is just simply way better, and it's so much better that a lot of the heroes we're going to be mentioning to be looking to pick in this patch are heroes that naturally build Shivas, and now they're just god tier because Shivas was already an item they'd buy almost every single game, and now they can either rush it sometimes or at least get an early Veil, and then the later Shivas is just that much more convenient to build and also powerful. The second item to keep an eye out for, in my opinion, is Disperser. Now this item has been slept on for a while, and even though it's not replacing Satanic in terms of the sustain that it gives you, I think heroes that naturally build Diffusal or naturally have sustain will want to have Disperser much more than they will want to have Satanic on average. It's just going to be a better item as that second Dispel for carries. The reason why is it now gives agility, and they also buffed the active on it. So I'm really keeping an eye out for late game Dispersers on heroes like Slark, like Faceless Void. We even saw one on Medusa from Mickey. Heroes that don't need the sustain of Satanic and buy Disperser, I think are going to be much more attractive in the carry role. The third most important item change is Solar Crest. It is now built from Pavis. It gives the movement speed and attack speed active. And what's most notable about this item is that it can be self-casted and it doesn't cost any mana. So a lot of core players in Pro Dota right now are already just rushing Solar Crest on heroes like Invoker, for instance, that just Solar Crest themselves and run around the map. And even though it's no longer used aggressively in order to bring down a target and lower their armor, it just is a lot of attack speed and a lot of movement speed at no cost in terms of mana to your own hero. So it feels really good to build into, and it seems like every pro team is building at least one every single game, so keep an eye out for heroes that do that in your games. And for all the new items, I think the most powerful new item that I'm seeing the most of is Parasma in terms of affecting what heroes are viable. Most notably the fact that it now is a easier upgrade to Witchblade to build, and it gives that minus 20% magic debuff on the opponent, which means that heroes like Storm and Puck win rates did go up, and it's important to note that if a hero naturally buys Witchblade, it is much more realistic to upgrade to Parasma than it ever was to upgrade to Revenant's Brooch. As a little bonus tidbit for the item section, I want you guys to know that I believe Heart of Tarrasque is officially gutted. It is not a very good item anymore, so the whole Blade Mail Heart meta is going to be gone, and that's going to significantly impact the heroes that we will want to see in this patch. So, with all that being said, we've got gameplay changes, we've got items, but there's also a lot of heroes that got changed in this patch. And I want you guys to note that for the most part, the heroes that I think are good this patch, yeah, some of them received some buffs and other heroes received some nerfs. That certainly happened. But what's important to note is that I think most of the heroes that are now good are simply beneficiaries of all of the other changes that we've already mentioned, or amongst some other changes that I'll probably clue you guys in on if relevant. Let's go ahead and go role by role. And we're going to go and count down because I know you guys like listening to carry the most, so I'll tease you just a little bit. So, starting with supports, I think the number 1-5 by a large margin, we're seeing it in Pro Dota, and I think it just speaks for itself, is Vengeful Spirit. What they effectively did to her is she's an amazing Solar Crest buyer, one of the best items in the game right now, and then on top of that, she has damage on swap. So giving a hero who kind of has lackluster damage in the mid game an extra 100 damage at level 6 and an extra 250 damage at level 12 while still having all the defensive capabilities of the old swap. Yeah, it scales a bit lesser because it doesn't give percent damage reduction later, but this mid game is what Venge has always lacked, and her late game is always conceptually broken with minus armor, bonus damage, and the ability to save teammates. And when we're looking at win rates in pubs right now, Abaddon is sitting at a 56% win rate. So Abaddon support, keep an eye out. He's one of the best lane babysitting supports. We mentioned the change from the Twin Gates earlier. I think heroes that just keep their carries sustained and allow them to stay in lane are going to be very powerful. And he might even be worthwhile considering as a core, but I'm leaning more towards support for Abaddon this patch. And lastly, in the 5, I'm going with Crystal Maiden. They buffed up her mana regen. It feels like the Heart Blade Mail meta was really bad for heroes like Crystal Maiden. The worst feeling you could have on these heroes is that you just see a 3000 HP guy, and even if you lock them down and kite them, they're just never dying. But now I'm already seeing a lot more spirits and mobile heroes that really suffer against her root, so she's going to be doing very well against a lot of the other meta heroes in Dota right now, and she also is just going to have enough mana in the early game to do her job. In the 4 position, we're going to be talking about a lot of disablers. So first and foremost, Lion. I believe the memes are finally real. They gave mana drain. 100% of mana drained is now damaged, just a strict buff. And we're seeing Boxy, for instance, from Liquid be going not plate mail like the memes all said, but he goes Shard, triple Wraithband, sometimes before Blink, because the Wraithbands at 25 minutes are the most cost-effective HP armor item in the game when you have 80% magic resistance and you can't get stunned. So I do not believe the Shard is a meme anymore. I put it in C tier in my previous video. Please forgive me. I believe it is now S tier given the circumstances of this new patch. I know you guys are merciful, and right now I'm asking for you to do that for me. Next up in the 4 position role is Shadow Shaman, as his Hex with the level 10 talent he's received is now 35% bonus damage on the Hexed target. I believe this hero was already good. They also gave him 1 bonus armor in his laning phase. I mean, it's all game, but it helps his laning phase a lot, and his win rate in pubs speaks for it as well. And for a melee 4, I'm really leaning towards Tusk. Just feels like a nice utility support right now. He can build items like Solar Crest, he can build items like Blink to catch people. He has multiple different styles. His laning stage feels pretty strong. And overall, I think the change to Walrus Punch was better for Tusk support rather than Tusk core. Coming in at the 3 role, pretty much heroes that can rush Veil have all been buffed. We're even seeing like Mars in competitive, go for the Helm of the Iron Will, and then later for Veil. So keep in mind that that's going to be the new Vanguard, I think. But there are going to be heroes that still abuse Vanguard. But we're already seeing Sand King at a 55% win rate despite all the nerfs. Right when I saw the patch come out, a hero that wasn't picked, Sand King, getting nerfed, that told me that there must be some item on him that's absolutely freaking broken. So we're going to put Sand King and Timbersaw in the same category of the best offlaners for rushing Veil, and Veil into Shivas being the best item combo right now. Those two are absolutely two to keep an eye out for. Timbersaw went up 7% win rate this patch. My next hero is Axe, another hero that fell victim to the Blade Mail heart meta, because even though he liked building Blade Mail, he did not like seeing heroes that were 3000 HP that he could never initiate onto, and that is absolutely not the case anymore, and his win rate being above 53% in the new patch speaks bounds as well. And even though he got nerfed, his win rate went from 57% to 54%. You know who I'm talking about, Slardar. Still a very powerful offlane in my opinion, and his laning stage is going to be reliable, and since it's so good to sit in lanes right now, as I already mentioned, the jungle being weaker, Slardar is an offlaner that if I'm playing as carry against, I just want to leave the second he's level 6. So offlaners that sit in lane and you don't want to lane against them anymore, their stocks are rising. Going to the mid lane, the beneficiary of the Veil, which he doesn't rush, but he is going to buy it later, for the Shiva's Guard is Leshrac. They also made it so Bloodstone gives AoE on all your spells. That applies to his Pulse Nova as well as his Split Earth, and his win rate is 56%. It shot up 10% in the last day. So guys, Leshrac absolutely fucking busted, okay? Keep that in mind. I believe this hero is untouchable and can also be played in the carry role. And when I get home, I will be playing Carry Leshrac because he's one of my favorites. Mana Boots, into Bloodstone, into Veil Shivas. If possible, maybe I'll have to stop back for like a Kaya Sange or a BKB for a little bit of survivability. In the mid lane, next up, I believe is Pangolier. Yeah, they gave him his level 15 talent for free, and they made his shield crash physical damage as well to match his swashbuckle. I think that just means that his synergies are much more clear cut when we're looking at heroes like Venge minus armor that go really well with him, and the Slardar. Diffusal Blade is still a very powerful item on him especially, and the Disperser buff is only even better for Pango than he was before. And my sleeper pick for the mid lane, whose win rate has also shot up, and I really liked playing her last patch, and she's also one of the best Shiva's Guard builders in the entire game. You guessed it, Death Prophet. I believe this hero is going to be seen in the mid lane with some sort of Mana Boots into Veil, into Shiva's build. What better do you want than a hero that runs the fuck in, does a bunch of AoE spell damage, Death Prophet fits the bill, and she also received a noteworthy buff on her silence, which now supplies a slow. And one of the best ways to deal with Death Prophet was to simply run away from her. Since her silence is now a slow, you don't have abilities to cast, and you also can't run away nearly as fast. So definitely try out Death Prophet, because I will be too. And last but not least, my favorite role, and probably many of you, because you are subscribed to me. If you're not subscribed, please do that, is the carry role. That is going to be heroes that sit in lane are going to be the ones that I really emphasize for this role. First off, Lifestealer. I think he's very strong still from last patch. I think he can either go for like a Maelstrom into Armlet build that we saw, or he can go Armlet into a Radiance build just like before. I just think this hero being able to sit on lanes and bully out a lot of the strength offlaners that we're likely to see is absolutely essential. If you feel like you're going to be booted in the jungle, definitely go for that early Maelstrom, because that's the best way for this hero to recovery farm. I think with that Maelstrom change is beneficial to him, but also Midas feels a bit lackluster now with the nerfs. And on that note of staying in lane with built-in sustain, we're seeing Faceless Void and my boy Slark. Faceless Void was already powerful last patch, and I believe that little buff to him in 7.35 was a bit like weird to me. Maybe because they changed Mask of Madness as well as Maelstrom, they felt the need to buff him, but he's sitting at a healthy 53% win rate in pubs right now, and that includes for your guys' pubs. So I think Faceless Void's gonna have a good time in lane. He has natural item buildup, and he likes to go for that late game Disperser. Yatro's been spamming that, and I highly recommend you guys try that yourselves. In the same vein, Slark. He's going to go for that early diffusal. The Echo Saber changes for him are really nice, and overall, those little stat gains that they gave Slark, as a Slark spammer myself, he has pathetic stat gains, and to give a hero like that extra stat gains cannot be understated in its importance. So I'm definitely going to be playing more Slark myself because he boots offlaners out of lane, the same vein as Slardar as an offlaner against these carries. Any hero that really controls the lane and naturally boots you out and then has the sustain from the Slark level 6, I believe is going to be powerful in this meta. I'd like to give a brief sleeper shout out to Butterfly as an item. So the way Butterfly now works is it gives 20% of your base attack speed rather than 30 flat attack speed. So what that means is if you have 150 agility or more, you're benefiting from that change. So that means agi heroes that have high stat gains and then build a lot of stat items, I think are going to be a bit under the radar and are going to come into the meta as we move further into the patch, and I'm going to get off the ground running now. Specifically, I'm thinking Terrorblade, Luna, and Medusa are the most powerful butterfly builders in the game right now. And I'll keep an eye out for potential others that may surface. So that concludes my first video for 7.35. I hope you guys enjoyed this little bit of a BSJ meta update. I'll be in ESL Kuala Lumpur for the next week, and during that time, I will be releasing updates as I pay attention to the meta shifting. Thanks for watching, everybody. Once again, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video.